Jamila found that out when her husband locked her out of their apartment with nothing but a suitcase and $400. Her best friend would not answer the phone. The police thought she was the criminal. And then he appeared, sitting in a 24-hour cafe, like he had been waiting for her all along. Dae-hyun, Korean Mafia Boss, problem solver. He looked at her destroyed life and saw opportunity. "I can get your revenge," he said, "but you have to be willing to cross lines you never imagined." Jamila looked at her wedding ring, then took it off. "Show me the lines," she said. Are you ready to watch Jamila take back everything they stole from her? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this K-drama revenge thriller is about to get absolutely wild. Jamila stared at Dae-hyun across the small cafe table, her mind racing. What kind of business deal? Your husband convinced my associate to invest in a translation contract for a major pharmaceutical company, Dae-hyun said, stirring sugar into his coffee with deliberate slowness. $300,000 up front for a 6-month project. The exact amount that had disappeared from her accounts. That's my money. I know. His voice was calm, almost gentle. My associate gave the money to your husband yesterday, believing it would go directly to your company for the translation work. Jamila's hands started shaking. Yesterday. But the bank records show those withdrawals happened weeks ago. Which means your husband has been planning this for much longer than you realized. Dae-hyun leaned forward. He's been setting up multiple investors, collecting money for contracts that your company was never going to fulfill. The room spun around her. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was an elaborate fraud scheme using her business as a front. How many investors? 7. That I know of. Probably more. 7. The number hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't about their marriage, or even So Young's betrayal. This was about destroying her completely, while making millions in the process. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I don't like being lied to," Dae-hyun said. "And because I think you and I can help each other." "Help each other how?" "You want your life back. I want my money back. Your husband has both." There was something in his tone that made Jamila study his face more carefully. He looked like any other businessman you might see in Gangnam, but there was an edge to him that suggested he wasn't just another corporate executive. "What exactly do you do for work?" she asked. "I solve problems for people who can't solve them through normal channels." That's not really an answer. Dae-hyun smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Let's just say I'm very good at getting people to return things that don't belong to them." A shiver ran down Jamila's spine, but it wasn't entirely from fear. There was something magnetic about his confidence. The way he spoke, like every problem had a solution, if you just knew the right approach. "I can't afford to pay you," she said honestly. "I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "You know your husband's habits, his friends, his weaknesses. You understand how your business operates, and where he might have hidden additional evidence." Dae-hyun's eyes never left her face. "I know how to make people nervous enough to make mistakes." Before Jamila could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or things will get much worse for you." She showed the message to Dae-hyun, whose expression darkened. "They know you're investigating," he said quietly. "How is that possible?" "I only talked to the police this morning. Your husband is smarter than you gave him credit for. He's probably been monitoring your phone, your computer, maybe even your movements." The violation felt like being punched in the stomach. For how long? Months, probably. Long enough to stay ahead of any suspicions you might have had. Jamila's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from So Young. "Don't answer it," Dae-hyun said sharply. "Why not?" "Because they're testing to see where you are, and who you're with. If you answer, they'll know you're not alone." The phone kept ringing, So Young's name flashing on the screen like an accusation. Jamila had answered thousands of calls from her best friend over the years, shared secrets and dreams and stupid jokes that only they understood. Now even her ringtone felt like a threat. What if I don't answer and they get suspicious? They're already suspicious. Now we use that against them. Dae-hyun pulled out his own phone and made a quick call. He spoke in rapid Korean, too fast for Jamila to follow, but she caught a few words that made her nervous. Words like surveillance, and immediately, and everything. "What did you just do?" she asked when he hung up. I called in some favors. By tomorrow morning, we'll know everywhere your husband and So Young have been for the past month. Everyone they've talked to, and every account they've accessed. That's illegal. So is stealing $300,000 and framing an innocent woman for fraud. He had a point, but Jamila still felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something she didn't understand. I need to think about this, she said. Of course. But while you're thinking, your husband is probably transferring the money to offshore accounts and preparing to disappear. Dae-hyun stood up and dropped a business card on the table. Call me when you're ready to stop being a victim. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone with her cold coffee and the growing certainty that her old life was never coming back. The business card was simple, just his name and a phone number, printed on expensive paper that felt substantial between her fingers. No company name, no job title, nothing to indicate what kind of problem solver he really was. Jamila's phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time she answered. Miss Kim, this is Attorney Lee from Hansung Corporation. We need to schedule a meeting regarding the breach of contract and missing funds. Another investor, another victim of Min Jun's scheme. I understand there may be some confusion about the payments, Jamila said carefully. No confusion, Miss Kim. $300,000 was wired to your company account yesterday for a translation project that was supposed to start today. When we called your office, we were told the company had declared bankruptcy and all contracts were void. Jamila's heart sank. Who told you that? Your business partner, Ms. So Young Park. She was very apologetic about the situation. Of course she was. So Young had probably practiced her concerned voice in the mirror, perfecting the right tone of regretful professionalism. Attorney Lee, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never authorized any bankruptcy filing, and I never agreed to void our contract. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, Ms. Kim, according to our records, you personally signed the bankruptcy papers yesterday afternoon. Impossible. Yesterday afternoon she'd been at the police station, then confronting Min Jun and So Young at home. Could you fax me copies of those documents? She asked. Certainly. What fax number should I use? Jamila realized she didn't have access to a fax machine anymore. Her office was locked up. Her home office belonged to Min Jun, and she was sitting in a cafe with nothing but a suitcase and a rapidly dwindling phone battery. I'll call you back with a number, she said. After hanging up, Jamila stared at Dae-hyun's business card. He was right about one thing. While she sat here feeling sorry for herself, Min Jun and So Young were actively destroying what was left of her reputation and probably setting up their escape route. She dialed his number. I was wondering when you'd call, Dae-hyun said without preamble. How did you know it was me? Because you're smart enough to realize you can't fight this alone, and proud enough to try anyway. There was something almost admiring in his voice that made Jamila's cheeks warm. What's the first step? She asked. Meet me at the Hyatt lobby in 30 minutes. We're going to get those bankruptcy documents. How? Trust me. The line went dead, leaving Jamila staring at her phone and wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision she'd ever made. The Hyatt lobby was all marble and crystal, the kind of place where Jamila used to meet international clients, back when she had international clients. Now she felt like an imposter in her wrinkled clothes and yesterday's makeup, dragging a suitcase through a world she no longer belonged to. Dae-hyun was waiting near the concierge desk, but he wasn't alone. A woman in a crisp business suit stood beside him, holding a briefcase and looking like she'd stepped out of a legal drama. Jamila, meet attorney Kim Min-ah, Dae-hyun said. She specializes in corporate fraud cases. I don't understand, Jamila said. Attorney Lee from Hansung Corporation is meeting us here in 10 minutes, Min-ah explained. He thinks he's coming to discuss settlement terms with your legal representation. But I didn't hire you. Actually, you did. About an hour ago, when Mr. Dae-hyun retained my services on your behalf. Jamila looked between them, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's life. I still don't understand what's happening. We're about to prove that someone forged your signature on those bankruptcy documents, Dae-hyun said. And then, we're going to find out who's behind the corporate seal that was used to make them official. Corporate seal? Every business in Korea needs an official seal for legal documents, Min Mai explained. Whoever filed those bankruptcy papers had access to your company's seal. That's not something your husband could fake. The implications hit Jamila like a truck. So Young had the seal. I gave it to her when she started helping with the legal paperwork. Which means she's been forging documents for months, maybe longer, Dae-hyun said grimly. Attorney Lee arrived precisely on time, a thin man in his 50s who looked like he'd spent his entire life reading contracts. He greeted Min-ah with professional courtesy and barely glanced at Jamila. I have the bankruptcy documents you requested, he said, pulling papers from his briefcase. As you can see, everything appears to be in order. Min-ah studied the papers with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. After a few minutes, she pulled out a magnifying glass and focused on the signature. This is interesting, she murmured. Attorney Lee, did you personally witness Miss Kim signing these documents? No, they were delivered by courier from her office. And you verified the signature how? Against the signature cards we have on file from the original contract. Min-ah turned to Jamila. Ms. Kim, could you sign your name on this blank paper, please? Jamila signed her name with the pen Min-ah provided, acutely aware that everyone was watching her hand movements. Now compare these signatures, Min-ah said, laying the papers side by side. Even Jamila could see the difference. The forged signature was too perfect, too careful. Real signatures had tiny variations, unconscious quirks that were impossible to replicate exactly. This document is fraudulent, Min-ah announced. Attorney Lee's face went pale. That's impossible. It came directly from Seoul Translation Services. No. It came from someone who had access to the company's seal and signature samples, but who isn't Ms. Kim herself. Are you suggesting that one of Ms. Kim's employees filed false bankruptcy papers? I'm not suggesting anything, Min-ah said coolly. I'm stating that this signature is forged, which means any legal actions based on these documents are null and void. But the money, Attorney Lee said weakly. Hansung Corporation transferred $300,000 yesterday. To an account that wasn't authorized by the actual owner of Seoul Translation Services, Dae-hyun said, which makes it theft, not a business transaction. The meeting ended with Attorney Lee promising to contact the police immediately, and Min-ah scheduling follow-up meetings with all the affected investors. Jamila felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold, someone competent and powerful, who didn't spend her nights crying in 24-hour cafes. How did you know the signature was forged? She asked Min-ah, as they walked through the hotel lobby. I didn't, but I know how to look for the signs, and I know that desperate people make sloppy mistakes. Min-ah smiled. Your husband and his girlfriend got greedy. They should have stopped after the first theft, but they kept pushing until they made errors. What happens now? Now we gather evidence, build a case, and make sure they face consequences for what they did, Dae-hyun said. And then? Then you get your life back. But as they walked toward the hotel exit, Jamila's phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed her office number. Don't answer it, Dae-hyun said, but Jamila was already pressing the accept button. Seoul Translation Services. This is Jamila. Finally, So Young's voice was sharp with irritation. I've been trying to reach you all day. Have you? We need to talk. There are some legal documents you need to sign, and the police want to ask you a few more questions. What kind of legal documents? Just some paperwork to finalize the bankruptcy and make sure our client's remaining funds are protected. More lies, delivered with the same casual confidence that had fooled Jamila for months. But now she could hear the calculation behind So Young's words, the way each sentence was designed to manipulate and control. I'll be right there, Jamila said. Good. And Jamila? Come alone. Some of this information is sensitive, and we don't want rumors spreading before everything is resolved. The line went dead, and Jamila found herself staring at two very concerned faces. You're not actually going there, Dae-hyun said. Yes, I am, but not alone, and not unprepared. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to stop running and start fighting back. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jamila felt like herself again. Not the victim, not the betrayed wife and friend, but the woman who had built a successful business from nothing in a foreign country. The woman who spoke 4 languages and had negotiated contracts with some of the biggest companies in Asia. The woman who was about to remind her husband and best friend exactly who they were messing with. The plan was simple, but required perfect timing. Jamila would go to her office as requested, but she wouldn't be alone. Dae-hyun and Min-ah would be listening through a wire, recording everything that was said. If So-young and Min-jun incriminated themselves, it would be admissible evidence in court. "Are you sure about this?" Min-ah asked as she attached the tiny recording device to Jamila's jacket. "If they realize you're recording, things could get dangerous. They've already destroyed my business, stolen my money, and ruined my reputation," Jamila said. "What else can they do to me?" "A lot," Dae-hyun said grimly, "which is why I'll be in the building across the street. If anything goes wrong, if you feel threatened at all, just say the word translation, and I'll be there in 30 seconds. The code word felt both reassuring and terrifying. Part of Jamila hoped she wouldn't need it. Another part wondered what exactly Dae-hyun would do if she did. "Remember, your goal is to get them talking," Min-ah coached. "Ask questions about the timeline, about who else is involved, about where the money went. Let them think they're in control. What if they don't say anything incriminating?" "They will," Dae-hyun said with certainty. "Criminals always want to explain how clever they've been. It's their weakness." The Seoul Translation Services office building looked the same as always, a modest 15-story structure in the business district, where she'd signed a 5-year lease just 18 months ago, back when she thought her biggest problem was finding enough qualified translators to handle all the work. The security guard nodded to her as she passed, but his greeting felt different somehow, colder. News traveled fast in buildings like this, and she wondered how many people already knew about the bankruptcy filing. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt longer than usual. Jamila used the time to center herself, to remember that she wasn't the same woman who had discovered the betrayal yesterday. She was someone who had allies now, someone with a plan. The hallway outside her office was empty, but she could hear voices through the frosted glass door. Min-jun and So-young were already there, probably preparing their next round of lies. Jamila took a deep breath and opened the door. "There she is," So-young said with false brightness. "We were starting to worry." The office looked different with the 2 of them in it. They'd clearly been going through her files, and several boxes were stacked near the door like they'd been packing up. "What's in the boxes?" Jamila asked. "Just some personal items we thought you might want," Min-jun said, "and some documents that need to be secured during the bankruptcy proceedings." "What documents?" "Client files, contract templates, financial records." So-young was moving around the office like she owned it, touching things that belonged to Jamila with casual familiarity. "Everything needs to be properly cataloged for the court." "I see you've already started without me." "We didn't want to wait too long," Min-jun said. "Some of these documents are time-sensitive." Jamila sat down behind her own desk, noting how both of them remained standing. A power play designed to make her feel like a visitor in her own office. "So what exactly do you need me to sign?" she asked. So-young pulled out a folder thick with papers. "Just some standard forms. Authorization for us to act on behalf of the company during bankruptcy. Release forms for outstanding debts, that sort of thing." "Why would I authorize you to act on behalf of my company?" "Because you're obviously not in the right headspace to handle these things yourself," Min-jun said. "And because So-young has been managing your books anyway, it makes sense for her to continue during the transition." The casual cruelty of it took Jamila's breath away. They were sitting in her office, stealing her company, and making it sound like they were doing her a favor. "Transition to what?" "To whatever comes next for you," So-young said gently. "Maybe it's time to think about going back to the States. Starting fresh somewhere where people don't know about the financial problems." "You mean where people don't know that I've been accused of embezzlement?" "That too," Min-jun agreed. "It might be easier than trying to rebuild here." They wanted her gone. Not just out of the business, but out of the country entirely. The scope of their planning was breathtaking. "What about the police investigation?" Jamila asked. "What about it?" So-young's voice was carefully neutral. "Don't you think they'll want to question me more before I leave the country?" "The investigation is mostly a formality at this point," Min-jun said. "The evidence is pretty clear about what happened." "Is it?" Because I'm still not sure I understand how money disappeared from accounts only I had access to. You gave So-young access, Min-jun reminded her. Remember? You said you trusted her to help with the finances. I trusted her to help with bookkeeping. I never gave her authorization to make large withdrawals. The bank records show your authorization, So-young said. My forged authorization. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. So-young and Min-jun exchanged a look that lasted a fraction of a second too long. Why would you think the authorization was forged? Min-jun asked carefully. Because I never signed it. And because I've seen the documents. What documents? This was the moment. Jamila could feel the recording device against her chest, like a small, warm secret. The bankruptcy papers you filed yesterday. The signature analysis shows they were forged. So-young's composure cracked just slightly. That's impossible. I watched you sign those papers myself. Really? When? When we... So-young stopped herself, but it was too late. When we what, So-young? When did you watch me sign papers that I never signed? You're confused, Min-jun said quickly. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you don't remember signing things. But Jamila was watching So-young's face, seeing the panic creep in around the edges of her fake concern. How long have you two been planning this? She asked quietly. Planning what? Min-jun's voice was getting harder. The theft, the frame job, the whole thing. Nobody planned anything, So-young said, but her voice was shaking now. Your business failed because you made bad decisions. We tried to help, but... You tried to help by stealing $300,000? We didn't steal anything, Min-jun said, standing up abruptly. And I think this conversation is over. Actually, I don't think it is. Jamila remained seated, projecting a calm she didn't feel. I think we're just getting to the interesting part. What interesting part? The part where you explain how you managed to fool 7 different investors into thinking I had signed contracts for work my company was never going to do. The number 7 hit them like a physical blow. So-young actually took a step backward, and Min-jun's face went completely white. How did you... So-young started, then stopped herself. How did I what? How did I find out about the other investors? How did I discover the offshore accounts? How did I figure out this has been going on for months? Neither of them answered, but they didn't need to. The truth was written all over their faces. You know what the really brilliant part was? Jamila continued, her voice getting stronger with every word. Making me think I was going crazy. Making me doubt my own memory, my own judgment. That was genius-level manipulation. Stop, Min-jun said. Stop what? Talking about how my own husband convinced me I was paranoid for noticing that money was disappearing. Stop talking about how my best friend volunteered to help with the books so she could steal from me more efficiently. You don't understand the pressure we've been under, So-young said suddenly. The debts, the obligations. We didn't have a choice. We, Jamila asked. So you admit you've been working together. Shut up, Min-jun hissed at So-young. But So-young was falling apart now. Months of lies and stress finally catching up with her. She was going to find out eventually anyway. The business was already failing, and we just what? Jamila pressed. We just accelerated the timeline. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Min-jun looked at So-young with pure fury, realizing she'd just destroyed their carefully constructed cover story. You accelerated the timeline by stealing my client's money and framing me for embezzlement, Jamila said. And then you were going to let me go to prison while you disappeared with millions of dollars. It wasn't supposed to go that far, So-young said weakly. How far was it supposed to go? Just the business. We were just going to take the business and let you think it failed naturally. But then you got greedy, Jamila said. You realized you could make more money by framing me for fraud. The police investigation complicated things, Min-jun said quietly. And there it was. The full confession, recorded and admissible in court. Jamila stood up from her desk, feeling lighter than she had in days. Well, this has been enlightening. Where are you going? So-young asked. To turn this recording over to the police. The silence that followed was deafening. Min-jun and So-young stared at her, like she'd just announced she could fly. You're bluffing, Min-jun said finally. Translation, Jamila said clearly. The office door burst open 30 seconds later. just as Daehyun had promised. But he wasn't alone. 2 police officers followed him into the room, and Min-ah brought up the rear with a briefcase full of evidence. Kim Min-jun and Park So-young, one of the officers announced. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft. Watching them get handcuffed was surreal. These were people she had loved, people she had trusted with her deepest secrets and biggest dreams. Now they looked like strangers wearing familiar faces. This isn't over, Min-jun said, as the officers led him toward the door. Actually, it is, Jamila replied. And you lost. As the office emptied out, Jamila found herself alone with Daehyun, for the first time since the cafe. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and exhausted. How do you feel? He asked. Like I just watched my entire life get rewritten, she said honestly. The good news is, you get to write the next chapter yourself. What if I don't remember how? Daehyun moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Then I'll help you remember. There was something in his voice that made her heart speed up, something that had nothing to do with revenge or justice, or getting her life back. Something that was just about him and her, and the way he was looking at her, like she was the most interesting person he'd ever met. Why? She asked. Why are you helping me? Because watching someone fight back against impossible odds is the most beautiful thing in the world. Jamila felt her cheeks warm, even when they're a complete mess? Especially then. If this was a K-drama moment, music would be swelling right now, and the camera would be zooming in on their faces. But this was real life, messy and complicated, and beautiful in its own chaotic way. What happens next? She asked. Next, we make sure Min-jun and So-young face consequences for what they did. We recover your money and rebuild your reputation. We prove that you're not a victim, you're a survivor. And after that? After that, Daehyun said with a smile that made her stomach flutter, we see what else we can build together. But before Jamila could respond, her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, with an international prefix that made her blood run cold. Answer it, Daehyun said grimly. Hello? Ms. Kim, this is Agent Rodriguez from the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk. The FBI agent's voice was crisp and professional, cutting through the silence of Jamila's office like a knife through paper. We've been tracking an international money laundering operation, and your company appears to be at the center of it. Jamila's legs gave out, and she sank back into her desk chair. That's impossible. I run a translation service. A translation service that has processed over $2 million in suspicious transactions over the past 6 months. Agent Rodriguez continued. We need you to come in for questioning immediately. 2 million? Jamila's voice came out as a whisper. The room started spinning around her. Ms. Kim, are you still there? I'm here. She looked at Daehyun, who had moved to stand behind her chair, his presence both comforting and concerning. Agent Rodriguez, I think I'm going to need a lawyer. That's your right, but I should warn you, we have financial records that show your personal involvement in these transactions. The sooner we can clear this up, the better it will be for everyone involved. After hanging up, Jamila stared at her phone like it might explode. $2 million. Daehyun, they're saying $2 million went through my company accounts. Your husband and So-young were busier than we thought, he said grimly. This isn't just about stealing from me anymore. This is international fraud. I could go to prison for decades. Daehyun placed his hands on her shoulders, and she could feel the warmth of his touch through her jacket. That's not going to happen. How can you be so sure? Because we're going to prove you had nothing to do with it. But what if we can't? What if the evidence is too perfect, too convincing? Then we'll create better evidence. There was something in his tone that made Jamila turn to look at him. What do you mean by that? I mean that sometimes the system fails innocent people, and when that happens, you have to work outside the system to find justice. Are you talking about doing something illegal? I'm talking about doing whatever it takes to protect you. The intensity in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. There was clearly more to Daehyun than she'd realized, and she wasn't sure if that should scare her or make her feel safer. Attorney Kim Min-ah burst through the office door, her face flushed from running. I just got a call from the FBI. They want to interview you tomorrow morning. What do I do? Jamila asked. We prepare. Tonight. Min-ah started unpacking her briefcase with military precision. We're going to go through every transaction, every contract, every piece of paper that went through this office for the past year. And we're going to find proof that you were set up. What if there isn't any proof? There's always proof. Criminals think they're smarter than they are, but they always leave traces. As Min-ah spread documents across the desk, Dae-hyun's phone buzzed. He stepped away to take the call, speaking in rapid Korean that Jamila couldn't follow, but she caught enough words to understand that something had gone wrong. What is it? She asked when he returned. Min Jun made bail 2 hours ago. That's impossible. The charges were serious. Someone posted $500,000 bail for him, cash. The implication hit Jamila like a physical blow. He has partners, people we don't know about. It gets worse, Dae-hyun said. So Young was released at the same time. Same bail amount, same anonymous benefactor. They're going to run, Min-ah said without looking up from the financial records. Tonight, probably, before the FBI interview tomorrow. Can we stop them? Not legally. They haven't been convicted of anything yet, and they're not considered flight risks. But they are flight risks, Jamila protested. Proving that and convincing a judge are two different things. Dae-hyun was already moving toward the door. I need to make some calls. Don't leave this building until I get back. Where are you going? To make sure your husband doesn't disappear before he faces justice. After he left, the office felt smaller and more vulnerable. Jamila helped Min-ah sort through documents, but her mind kept wandering to Dae-hyun and whatever he was planning. There was something dangerous about the way he'd said those last words, something that suggested his methods might not be entirely legal. Tell me about your relationship with Dae-hyun, Min-ah said suddenly. What do you mean? I mean, do you know what he actually does for work? He said he solves problems for people. That's not really an answer. I know, but honestly, I'm not sure I want to know the details right now. Min-ah looked up from the papers. Jamila, I like you. You seem like a good person who got caught up in something terrible. But I need you to understand that accepting help from certain people can come with a price. What kind of price? The kind that changes who you are permanently. Before Jamila could ask what she meant, her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she recognized with a sinking heart. Hello, Mother. Jamila, sweetheart, I just got the most disturbing phone call. From who? From Min Jun. He said there were some problems with your business, and that you might be in legal trouble. He sounded very concerned. Of course he did. Even from jail, Min Jun was still trying to manipulate the people in her life. Mother, whatever he told you isn't true. He said you've been under a lot of stress lately, and that you might have made some poor financial decisions. The gaslighting continued even from a distance. Min Jun knew exactly how to phrase things to make her sound unstable, while making himself sound like the concerned husband. Did he ask you for anything? Jamila asked. Well, he did mention that he might need to borrow some money to help with legal fees. To help you, of course. Mother, please don't give him any money, and don't believe anything he tells you about me. Sweetheart, why would your own husband lie about something like this? Because he's a sociopath who's been planning to destroy my life for months, Jamila thought. But saying that out loud would only make her sound more unstable. I can't explain everything over the phone, but I promise you, I'll call back tomorrow and tell you the whole story. After hanging up, Jamila felt the full weight of how completely Min Jun had isolated her. He'd spent months convincing everyone in her life that she was unreliable, that her judgment was compromised, that her version of events couldn't be trusted. When the truth finally came out, who would believe her word against his? He's very good at this, Min-ah observed. At what? Psychological manipulation. Your husband missed his calling. He should have been a cult leader. That's not funny. I'm not joking. The way he systematically isolated you, made you doubt yourself, convinced everyone around you that you were unstable. That's classic manipulation tactics. How do I fight back against that? With facts, hard evidence, Undeniable proof. Min-ah held up a bank statement that made Jamila's breath catch. Like this. The document showed a transfer of $1.2 million from Seoul Translation Services to an account in the Cayman Islands. The transfer was dated 3 days ago, authorized by Jamila's forged signature. "I never authorized that," Jamila said. "I know. But more importantly, this transfer happened while you were at the police station, giving your statement. The timestamp proves you couldn't have made this transaction." "That's good, right?" "It's better than good. It's ironclad proof that someone else was controlling your accounts." For the first time in days, Jamila felt a spark of hope. Can we trace where the money went from the Cayman Islands? That's where things get complicated. Offshore banking has privacy laws that make tracking difficult. But not impossible? Not if you know the right people to ask. As if summoned by her words, Dae-hyun appeared in the office doorway. He looked different somehow, more focused and determined than before. "We have a problem," he announced. "Just one?" Jamila asked. Min-jun and So-young checked into the Intercontinental Hotel 30 minutes ago. They bought plane tickets to Singapore for tomorrow night. After the FBI interview? No. Their flight leaves at 2 in the afternoon. The interview is scheduled for 10 in the morning. The timeline clicked into place in Jamila's mind. They're planning to give the FBI just enough information to pin everything on me, then disappear before anyone can verify their story. That's exactly what they're planning. How do you know all this? Because I have people watching them, and because Min-jun just made a very interesting phone call. Dae-hyun pulled out a small recording device. Listen to this. Min-jun's voice filled the office, tinny through the small speaker but perfectly clear. "The FBI meeting is tomorrow at 10. After that, we implement the exit strategy. Jamila takes the fall, we disappear with the money, and everyone gets paid." Then So-young's voice. "What about the girl? She's getting suspicious." "Jamila? She doesn't matter anymore. By tomorrow afternoon, she'll be in federal custody, and we'll be halfway to Singapore." Another voice, one Jamila didn't recognize. "And the Korean operation? Dae-hyun is a problem, but he can't prove anything. Once we're out of the country, he becomes someone else's concern." The recording ended, leaving the office in stunned silence. "They know about you," Jamila said to Dae-hyun. "They know you're helping me. I'm not worried about that." "Well, I am." Who was that third voice? Someone we haven't identified yet, but clearly someone with enough money to post bail for both of them. "This is bigger than we thought," Min-ah said, gathering up the papers. "International fraud, money laundering, organized crime. Jamila, you're not just fighting for your business anymore. You're fighting for your life." The words hung heavy in the air. Jamila had gone from worried about bankruptcy to potentially facing decades in federal prison in the space of 24 hours. "What do we do?" she asked. "We turn the tables," Dae-hyun said. "Instead of waiting for them to destroy you, we destroy them first." "How?" "By making them think their plan is working, right up until the moment we spring our trap." Before anyone could ask what he meant, Jamila's phone buzzed with a text from Min-jun. "Meet me at our apartment tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone. We need to talk about tomorrow." "Don't even think about it," Min-ah said immediately. "Actually," Dae-hyun said slowly, "maybe she should go." "Are you insane? It's obviously a trap." "Of course it's a trap, but sometimes the best way to catch someone is to let them think they've caught you." Jamila looked between her lawyer and her mysterious protector, feeling like she was standing at a crossroads that would determine the rest of her life. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked Dae-hyun. "I'm suggesting we give them what they want. Let them think you're beaten, desperate, ready to confess to crimes you didn't commit. And while they're celebrating their victory, we'll be recording everything they say." "That's incredibly dangerous," Min-ah protested. "Everything we're doing now is dangerous," Dae-hyun replied. "But this is our chance to get them on tape, admitting to the entire conspiracy. And if something goes wrong, then I'll be there to make sure nothing goes wrong." Guys, I need to pause here for a second, because this story is getting intense, and I'm dying to know what you think is going to happen next. Are you team Jamila and Dae-hyun? Do you think she should trust him completely, or is there something suspicious about how much he knows? Drop your theories in the comments, and let me know if you're getting major K-drama butterflies from these two. This revenge story is about to get so much more complicated. The plan was simple in theory, terrifying in execution. Jamila would meet Minjun at their old apartment, wearing a wire and carrying a concealed camera. She would pretend to be broken and desperate, ready to take the blame for everything in exchange for some kind of deal. The goal is to get them to lay out the entire scheme, Dae-hyun explained, as Min-ah fitted the recording equipment. Names, dates, money trails, everything. Once we have that, the FBI will have no choice but to believe you're innocent. What if they search me for recording devices? They won't. They think you're defeated. Defeated people don't plan elaborate stings. What if they try to hurt me? They won't, Dae-hyun said with absolute certainty. They need you alive and coherent for tomorrow's FBI interview. You're no good to them as a scapegoat if you're injured. That's reassuring, Jamila said dryly. I'll be in the building across the street, with a clear view of every window, Dae-hyun continued. If anything goes wrong, if you feel threatened at all, just say the word contract, and I'll be there in 60 seconds. 60 seconds is a long time if someone is trying to hurt me. Trust me, they're not going to hurt you. They're going to try to convince you that cooperating with them is your only option. And what do I say to that? You say yes. You agree to whatever they want. You make them believe they've won completely. As 7:30 approached, Jamila's hands started shaking. The recording equipment felt heavy against her chest, and she kept imagining all the ways this plan could go wrong. You don't have to do this, Min-ah said quietly. We could wait, build a case with the evidence we already have, and let them escape to Singapore tomorrow? Let them get away with destroying my life? At least you'd be safe. I haven't been safe since the day I married Minjun. At least this way, I'm fighting back. Dae-hyun appeared beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. You're going to be amazing, he said softly. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for. What if I'm not? Then you fake it until you make it. That's what survivors do. There was something in his voice, a note of personal experience, that made Jamila wonder what kind of survival he was speaking from. But there wasn't time to ask. It's time, he said. The walk to her old apartment building felt like a march to execution. Every step took her closer to confronting the people who had systematically destroyed everything she'd built. But it also took her closer to getting her life back. The elevator ride to the 8th floor was endless. Jamila used the time to center herself, to remember that she wasn't the same naive woman who had discovered the betrayal 2 days ago. She was someone who had allies now, someone with a plan. The apartment door was unlocked. Jamila pushed it open and stepped into what used to be her home. Minjun was waiting in the living room, but he wasn't alone. So Young sat on the couch beside him, and there was a third person Jamila didn't recognize, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd stepped out of a boardroom. Jamila, Minjun said with false warmth, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? There's always a choice. That's what we want to talk to you about. The stranger stood up and extended his hand. Miss Kim, I'm James Park, attorney for your husband and Miss So Young. I understand you're facing some serious legal challenges. Jamila didn't shake his hand. You could say that. Please, sit down. Let's discuss your options. The fact that they'd brought a lawyer made this meeting feel even more ominous. This wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore. This was business. What kind of options? Jamila asked, perching on the edge of a chair near the door. Well, the FBI is going to ask you some difficult questions tomorrow, James Park continued. Questions about financial transactions you may not remember authorizing, about business decisions that may seem suspicious in hindsight. Questions about crimes I didn't commit. Of course you didn't commit them intentionally, So Young said sweetly. But sometimes when people are under stress, they make poor choices. They sign things without reading them carefully. They authorize transactions they later forget about. The gaslighting was starting again, but this time, Jamila was ready for it. Are you saying I authorized the transfer of $1.2 million to the Cayman Islands and just forgot about it? People forget things when they're having emotional difficulties, James Park said. The FBI will be very understanding about that, especially if you're cooperative. Cooperative how? By acknowledging that you made some mistakes. by accepting responsibility for the financial irregularities in your company, by helping them understand that this was a case of poor judgment rather than criminal intent. Min-jun leaned forward. We've already spoken to the FBI, Jamila. We've explained how much pressure you've been under, how the business was failing, how you started making desperate choices to try to save it. You told them I'm guilty? We told them you're sick, So-young said, with fake concern. That you need help, not punishment. The beautiful cruelty of it took Jamila's breath away. They were going to destroy her reputation and her freedom while making themselves look like caring friends, trying to help a troubled woman. What happens if I don't cooperate? She asked. Then the FBI focuses on you as a criminal rather than a victim, James Park explained. Then you face decades in federal prison instead of court-mandated therapy and community service. And what happens to Min-jun and So-young in this scenario? They continue to be witnesses for the prosecution. Credible witnesses who tried to help a friend in crisis. How convenient for them. It could be convenient for you too, if you're smart about this. Jamila looked around the room at the three people who were systematically destroying her life while presenting it as a favor. The recording device against her chest felt like a secret weapon. Tell me exactly what you want me to say to the FBI, she said. Min-jun smiled, and for a moment, she saw a flash of the man she'd thought she married. Just the truth, Jamila. That you made some poor decisions when money got tight. That you authorized some transactions you probably shouldn't have. That you're sorry and you want to make things right. And in exchange, we all move on with our lives. You get the help you need, and eventually this whole nightmare becomes just a bad memory. What about the money? What money? So-young asked innocently. The $2 million that went through my company accounts. That money was spent trying to save your business, James Park said smoothly. Marketing expenses, equipment purchases, salary advances, all documented business expenses. I never authorized any of those expenses. Your signatures say otherwise. My forged signatures. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Min-jun's smile faltered, and So-young's fake concern cracked around the edges. Why would you think your signatures were forged? James Park asked carefully. Because I never signed anything authorizing $2 million in transactions. Memory is a funny thing, Min-jun said. Especially when someone is under the kind of stress you've been experiencing. My memory is fine. Is it? Because you seemed pretty confused about a lot of things over the past few months. The only thing I was confused about was why my husband and best friend were lying to me. So-young stood up abruptly. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she's not ready to be reasonable. Sit down, James Park said sharply. We're not finished. The command in his voice revealed who was really in charge of this operation. This wasn't Min-jun's plan or So-young's scheme. They were working for someone else. Who are you really? Jamila asked James Park. I told you. I'm their attorney. No, you're not. You're the person who posted their bail. You're the one who's been planning this from the beginning. James Park's pleasant facade slipped completely. You're smarter than they gave you credit for. Not smart enough to see this coming, apparently. No, but smart enough to cause problems now. That's why we need to resolve this situation tonight. By making me confess to crimes I didn't commit? By making you understand that you don't have any other options. Min-jun was watching this conversation with growing alarm, like he was realizing for the first time that he might not be in control of the situation. What happens if I refuse? Jamila asked. Then things get much more complicated for everyone, James Park said, including your new friend, Dae-hyun. The mention of Dae-hyun's name made Jamila's blood run cold. What does he have to do with this? More than you realize. Did you really think it was a coincidence that he found you in that cafe? That he just happened to have a solution to all your problems? What are you talking about? Dae-hyun Kim works for a very specific type of organization. The kind that doesn't forgive people who interfere with their business. You're lying. Am I? How much do you really know about him? What he does for work? Who he works for? Doubt crept into Jamila's mind despite her efforts to push it away. Dae-hyun had appeared at the perfect moment with perfect solutions. He'd known things about her situation that he shouldn't have known. He'd had resources and connections that ordinary businessmen didn't have. Even if that's true, it doesn't change what you did to me, she said. No, but it changes what happens next. Daehyun's organization and mine have a business relationship, one that doesn't leave room for personal vendettas. Meaning what? Meaning if you cooperate tomorrow, everyone gets what they want, and we all go our separate ways. If you don't cooperate, things get messy for everyone involved. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the situation. Jamila stood up, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. I need to think about this. Of course. But don't think too long. The FBI interview is in 12 hours. As she walked toward the door, So Young called after her. Jamila, we really are trying to help you. This is the best option for everyone. Contract, Jamila said clearly, then stepped out into the hallway. She made it to the elevator before her legs gave out completely. The elevator doors had barely closed when they opened again. Daehyun stepped in, his face grim, and his eyes scanning her for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked immediately. No, but we have a problem. They know about you. I heard. Jamila's blood went cold. You were listening? Every word. The wire worked perfectly. Then you heard what James Park said about your organization, about business relationships. Daehyun's jaw tightened. I heard. Is it true? The elevator descended in silence. When they reached the ground floor, Daehyun led her out of the building and into the cool Seoul night air before answering. It's complicated, he said finally. That's not an answer. Yes, I work for an organization that operates outside conventional business structures. Yes, we sometimes have dealings with people like James Park. And yes, I met you because your situation affected one of our operations. The honesty hit Jamila like a physical blow. So, everything has been a lie? No. Nothing about helping you has been a lie. But you didn't help me out of the goodness of your heart. I helped you because what happened to you was wrong. Because you didn't deserve to be destroyed by people who claim to love you. Because watching you fight back reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. They walked in silence for several blocks before Jamila found her voice again. What business? What do you really do? I protect people who can't protect themselves. I solve problems that the legal system can't solve. I make sure that people who hurt innocent victims face consequences. By doing illegal things? By doing necessary things. That's not the same thing. Sometimes it is. Jamila stopped walking and turned to face him. Under the streetlights, Daehyun looked younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Are you a criminal? She asked directly. That depends on how you define criminal. Someone who breaks the law. Then yes, I'm a criminal. So are you, by the way. What? Recording conversations without consent is illegal in Korea. Investigating financial fraud without proper authorization is illegal. Conspiring to entrap suspects is illegal. Daehyun's voice was gentle but firm. We've been breaking laws all day in pursuit of justice. The distinction made Jamila's head spin. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? You're willing to break the law to protect yourself and get justice. I break the law to protect other people and get justice. Where's the moral difference? Before Jamila could answer, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Change of plans. FBI interview moved to tonight. 11 p.m. Federal building downtown. Come alone or face the consequences. That's impossible, Jamila said, showing Daehyun the text. Federal agents don't conduct interviews at 11 p.m. No, they don't, which means this isn't from the FBI. Then who? James Park. He's accelerating his timeline because he knows we recorded tonight's conversation. How could he know that? Because he's been monitoring your phone, just like Min Jun was, and because he's realized that giving you 12 hours to think was a mistake. Jamila felt the walls closing in around her. What do I do? You don't go to any meeting at 11 p.m. You go home, get some sleep, and show up for your real FBI interview tomorrow morning. What if this is real? What if the FBI really did reschedule? Then they'll call you from an official number and confirm through your lawyer. This is a trap, Jamila. As if summoned by his words, Minna appeared out of the shadows of a nearby building. I've been looking for you. We have a situation. What now? Jamila asked wearily. The real FBI interview was moved up to 8 a.m. tomorrow. Agent Rodriguez wants to conclude the investigation before the media gets hold of the story. The media? Someone leaked the story to the Korean business press. Seoul Translation Services is going to be front-page news tomorrow morning. Let me guess, Daehyun said grimly. The story makes Jamila look guilty. Worse, it makes her look like the ringleader of an international fraud operation. Jamila sank onto a nearby bench, overwhelmed by the speed at which her life was disintegrating. They're destroying me from every angle. Not every angle, Daehyun said. We still have the recording from tonight. We still have proof that you were set up. Will it be enough? It'll have to be. Min-ah sat down beside Jamila. There's something else. I've been digging into James Park's background. He's not just a lawyer. He's the legal representative for a company called Pacific Investments. Never heard of it. It's a shell company that owns 17 other shell companies, which together control about 40 businesses across Asia. All legitimate on the surface, all connected to money laundering underneath. So this whole thing was never about me personally, Jamila realized. I was just convenient. You were perfect, Daehyun said. Successful enough to be worth stealing from, isolated enough to be vulnerable, and foreign enough that local authorities might not investigate too thoroughly. They probably planned to frame you and disappear, but when the FBI got involved, they had to adapt, Min-ah added. So what's the new plan? Simple. You tell the FBI everything. You give them the recording. You let them know about James Park and Pacific Investments. You trust that the truth will be enough. And if it's not? Daehyun and Min-ah exchanged a look that made Jamila nervous. Then we move to Plan B, Daehyun said. What's Plan B? You don't want to know. At 7:30 the next morning, Jamila stood outside the federal building in downtown Seoul, wearing her best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. She felt like she was about to take the most important test of her life. Min-ah waited beside her, projecting confidence that Jamila wished she felt. Remember, stick to the facts. Answer only what they ask. Don't speculate or offer theories. What if they don't believe me? They will. The evidence is overwhelming. What if James Park got to them first? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Daehyun was nowhere to be seen, but Jamila knew he was watching from somewhere nearby. The knowledge was both comforting and unsettling. Agent Rodriguez turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, who looked like she'd seen every type of financial crime imaginable. She greeted Jamila and Min-ah with professional courtesy and led them to a sterile conference room. Ms. Kim, thank you for coming in. I know this situation is stressful, but we're hoping to resolve it quickly. I appreciate that, Agent Rodriguez. I want to get to the truth as much as you do. Excellent. Let's start with the basics. Can you explain how $2.3 million came to be transferred through your company accounts without your knowledge? 2.3 million. The number had grown again overnight. I can explain how it happened, but first I need to tell you about James Park and Pacific Investments. Agent Rodriguez's pen stopped moving. What about them? For the next hour, Jamila laid out everything. The systematic manipulation by Min-jun and So-young, the forged signatures, the shell companies, the international money laundering scheme. She played the recording from the previous night, watching Agent Rodriguez's expression grow increasingly grim. This is extensive, Agent Rodriguez said finally. If what you're telling me is true, this goes far beyond simple embezzlement. It's true, all of it. The problem is, we need to verify your claims, and some of the people you've named have already given us different information. Jamila's heart sank. What kind of different information? Your husband and Ms. Park came in yesterday evening. They provided documentation showing that you personally authorized all of these transactions. They expressed concern about your mental state and suggested that you might not remember signing certain documents due to stress. They're lying, perhaps, but they brought compelling evidence, including security camera footage of you at the bank on 3 separate occasions, making large withdrawals. That's impossible. I never made any large withdrawals. Agent Rodriguez slid a tablet across the table. The screen showed grainy security footage of someone who looked exactly like Jamila standing at a bank counter. That's not me, Jamila said, but her voice sounded weak even to herself. The facial recognition software says otherwise. Then the facial recognition software is wrong. Minna leaned forward. Agent Rodriguez, we need to examine this footage more carefully. The timestamps, the angle of the cameras, the quality of the image. We've already done that. Our technical team confirms that this is legitimate security footage. Jamila stared at the screen, watching her doppelganger conduct transactions she'd never made. The resemblance was perfect, down to the way the woman held her head when she spoke to the teller. How is this possible? She whispered. There are several possibilities, Agent Rodriguez said. Identity theft, using sophisticated disguises, digital manipulation of security footage, or simple memory loss due to trauma. I'm not suffering from memory loss. That's what everyone with memory loss says. The interview continued for 2 more hours, with Agent Rodriguez asking increasingly pointed questions about Jamila's mental state, her financial pressures, and her relationship with Min Jun. By the end, Jamila felt like she was the one being investigated for a crime. What happens now? Minna asked. Now we continue our investigation. Ms. Kim, I strongly recommend that you don't leave Seoul until this matter is resolved. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but that could change quickly. Outside the federal building, Jamila felt like she'd been run over by a truck. They didn't believe me. They're being cautious. That's normal in cases like this. Cases where the victim looks guilty. Cases where the evidence is contradictory. The evidence isn't contradictory. It's fabricated. I know that. You know that. But proving it is going to take time. Time we don't have if James Park decides to eliminate the only witness who can expose his operation. As if summoned by her words, Jamila's phone rang. The caller ID showed James Park's number. Don't answer it, Minna said. Actually, do answer it, said a familiar voice behind them. Dae-hyun approached from across the street, but something about his demeanor was different. More focused, more dangerous. Why? Jamila asked. Because we're going to end this, today. How? By giving James Park exactly what he wants. Jamila answered the phone. Hello, Mr. Park. Ms. Kim, I trust your meeting with the FBI went well. You tell me. You seem to know everything else about my life. I know that you're in a difficult position, and I know that position is about to get much worse. What do you want? A meeting. One final conversation, to resolve this situation amicably. Where? The rooftop of your old office building. 1 hour. Come alone. And if I don't, then the evening news will feature a very interesting story about an American woman who used her translation business to launder money for North Korean agents. The line went dead, leaving Jamila staring at her phone in horror. North Korean agents? She asked. The ultimate nightmare scenario for any American living in South Korea, Dae-hyun explained grimly. Even the suggestion of that connection would destroy your life permanently. Can he actually prove something like that? He doesn't need to prove it. He just needs to make the accusation credibly enough that people believe it. So what do? We finish this, but not the way he expects. An hour later, Jamila stood on the rooftop of her office building, Seoul spread out below her like a circuit board of lights. The wind was cold and sharp, cutting through her jacket and making her eyes water. James Park was already there, standing near the edge with the confidence of someone who believed he controlled every variable in the equation. Min Jun and So Young flanked him like hired muscle, though they looked more nervous than threatening. Punctual as always, James Park said without turning around. I appreciate that in a business partner. We're not business partners. No, but we could be. That's what I wanted to discuss. I'm not interested in joining your money laundering operation. Money laundering is such an ugly term. I prefer to think of it as international financial consulting. James Park turned to face her, and in the artificial lighting of the rooftop, his face looked skeletal. Here's what's going to happen, Ms. Kim. You're going to admit to the FBI that you authorized those transactions. You're going to plead guilty to a reduced charge of financial mismanagement. You'll serve 18 months in a minimum security facility and pay a modest fine. And in exchange? In exchange, the story about North Korean money laundering disappears. Your husband and Ms. Park are allowed to relocate quietly to Singapore, and everyone moves on with their lives. What about the $2.3 million? Consider it the cost of doing business. Jamila looked at Min-jun and So-young, seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't masterminds or criminal geniuses. They were small, petty people who had gotten in over their heads and were now trapped in someone else's scheme. "What if I refuse?" she asked. "Then you spend the rest of your life fighting accusations of treason. Even if you eventually prove your innocence, you'll never work again. You'll never have a normal relationship again. You'll never have peace again." The threat was delivered with casual cruelty, like he was discussing the weather. "You've thought of everything," Jamila said. "I try to be thorough, except for one thing." "What's that?" "You assumed I came here alone." James Park's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "You did come alone, did I?" The rooftop lights went out suddenly, plunging them into darkness. In the confusion that followed, Jamila heard footsteps, shouting, and what sounded like a brief struggle. When emergency lighting kicked in 30 seconds later, James Park was on the ground, with his hands zip-tied behind his back. Min-jun and So-young were being held by two men Jamila didn't recognize. And Dae-hyun was standing in the middle of it all, like he'd been there the whole time. "Sorry I'm late," he said calmly. "How did you—" Jamila started. "I've been planning this for 3 days." James Park made one crucial mistake. What mistake? He assumed he was the only one with connections to people who operate outside the law. Agent Rodriguez stepped out of the rooftop access door, followed by 6 FBI agents. In the sudden bustle of arrests and Miranda rights, Jamila found herself standing alone with Dae-hyun. "The FBI was in on this?" she asked. "They've been investigating Pacific Investments for 2 years. When I brought them evidence of the money laundering operation, they were very interested in making a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Immunity for you and me, in exchange for James Park, and access to his financial records." "And Min-jun and So-young? They're looking at serious prison time, but probably not life sentences. They were pawns, not masterminds." Jamila watched as the 3 people who had destroyed her life were led away in handcuffs. She expected to feel satisfaction, or relief, or vindication. Instead, she just felt tired. "Is it over?" she asked. "The legal part is over. The money will be recovered. Your name will be cleared. Your business can be rebuilt. And the personal part? That's up to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do you want your life to look like now? Do you want to go back to the way things were before all this happened? Do you want to start something completely new? Do you want to disappear and pretend none of this ever existed?" Jamila considered the questions. A week ago, she would have done anything to get her old life back. Now, standing on a rooftop in Seoul with a man who had saved her in ways she was still discovering, she realized her old life had been built on foundations of sand. "What I want," she said slowly, "is to build something real, something that can't be destroyed by other people's lies or manipulation, or greed." "That sounds like a good plan. Want to help me figure out what that looks like?" Dae-hyun stepped closer, close enough that she could see her own reflection in his eyes. "Are you sure you want to build something with a criminal? Are you sure you want to build something with someone who just spent a week being investigated by the FBI? When you put it like that, we sound perfect for each other. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Problem Solver?" "That's my personal opinion, Ms. Translation Services." 6 months later, Jamila stood in the office of Seoul Language Solutions, watching her employees work on contracts for 3 major international corporations. The business was smaller than Seoul Translation Services had been, but it was entirely hers. No partners, no bookkeepers with access to accounts, no husband with signature authority. "The Hansung Corporation contract is ready for your review," her new office manager announced. "Thank you, Jinae." Through the window, Jamila could see Dae-hyun waiting in the lobby of the building across the street. He'd made good on his promise to help her rebuild, though his methods weren't always conventional. When a competitor had tried to spread rumors about her past legal troubles, the rumors had mysteriously stopped after one conversation with Dae-hyun. When a landlord had tried to overcharge her for office space, the lease had suddenly become much more reasonable. She still didn't know exactly what Dae-hyun did for work, but she'd learned that some questions were better left unasked. What mattered was that he kept his word, that he protected the people he cared about. and that he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Dinner tonight? I have news about Min Jun's sentencing." Jamila typed back. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news for justice. Bad news for Min Jun." "Perfect. See you at 7. As she prepared to leave the office, Jamila caught her reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had discovered the betrayal in her kitchen 7 months ago. Stronger, more careful, but also more open to possibilities she'd never considered before. Her phone rang with a call from her mother in Los Angeles. "Hi, Mom. Sweetheart, I just read the most wonderful article about your new business. It sounds like you're doing amazing things." "I'm trying to. And how are things with that young man you mentioned?" "Dae-hyun." Jamila smiled, watching him wave from across the street. "Things are good, Mom. Really good. I'm so proud of you, honey. You took something terrible and turned it into something beautiful." After hanging up, Jamila realized her mother was right. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had also led her to discover who she really was, beneath all the layers of other people's expectations. It had led her to Dae-hyun, to a business she'd built entirely on her own terms, to a life that belonged completely to herself. Min Jun and So-young were serving their sentences in separate prisons, their partnership destroyed by mutual accusations and blame. James Park had been extradited to the United States to face federal charges. Pacific Investments had been dismantled, and its victims had been compensated. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Jamila had learned that survival wasn't just about enduring difficult times. It was about using those times to become someone stronger and more authentic than you'd ever imagined possible. As she walked toward the elevator, Jamila's phone buzzed with one final message of the day. "Thank you for trusting me, even when you probably shouldn't have. See you soon. D." She typed back. "Thank you for saving me, even when I didn't know I needed saving." The elevator doors closed, and Jamila descended toward the lobby, toward Dae-hyun, toward whatever came next in this new life she'd built from the ashes of the old one. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. All right, beautiful people, we've reached the end of Jamila's incredible journey, from betrayal to triumph. If this story gave you all the feels, if you were cheering for her when she finally got her revenge, and if Dae-hyun made your heart skip a beat, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you thought of this wild ride. Should I make more stories like this? What other K-drama revenge plots do you want to see? Your support means everything to me, and I promise, the next story will be even more addictive than this one. Until next time, remember that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most beautiful new beginnings.